Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
Welcome back to the Genuine Humans podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined as usual with Wendy Christie, my co-host. Hello, Wendy.
Hello, how's it going?
Very, very well. We're actually doing a bit of an experiment. We're doing the podcast in a booth rather than online, and the person who has been willing to do that with us is the wonderful Sophie Devonshire, who's the CEO of the Marketing Society. And welcome, Sophie.
Thank you. I love being in a booth.
So I'm going to kick straight off, Sophie, because I would like to know how you got to where you are now. And please do take your time to do whether it was a squiggly career, whether you sort of jumped straight into marketing. So if we could kind of get a bit of a feel of your early career, if that's all right.
Of course. And it is squiggly, as they so often are. So it probably started when I was at university. I was recruited by Procter & Gamble. So I joined as a graduate trainee in brand management. And when I was at university, I wasn't at all interested in the idea of going to work for a packaged goods company. It sounded like a not particularly sexy thing to do. But the brilliant thing at the time was P&G recruited. It's a recruit from within policy and promote from within policy, and the recruitment is important. And they recruited people who were involved in societies, either presidents or secretaries within their university. And I was involved in quite a lot, and they didn't duplicate their database. So I got lots and lots of letters, and I felt really wanted.
Brilliant.
So it's one of those luck and decision moments where I thought, I'll go along for interview practice, see what it is. I was based in the northeast, I was in Durham. The interviews were in Newcastle. I wanted to be in London, but I thought I'd go along for interview practice. And I was interviewed by two people. It's a rigorous process. But the way in which they talked about business and marketing and the way in which they talked about life at Procter & Gamble was so compelling, so interesting, that before I knew it, I found myself accepting a role there, basing myself in Newcastle, thinking I'd only be there for a little while. Everyone told me it was good for my CV. But then I fell completely in love. I fell in love with brand management, with business, with the culture at P&G, with the people that I joined with and that I was working with, particularly one of them. So I had a long-term boyfriend at university who'd gone down to London. I was going to join him, but I felt totally and utterly in love with the man who is now my husband.
Brilliant.
Which was great. But what we then had was an interesting A/B testing experience where you realise, of course, that anything to do with work is all about finding the perfect match. And even though he had exactly the same experience as me at Procter & Gamble, he didn't love it. And he could see that my eyes were shiny, that I came home every night thinking, this is great, I'm in the right place for me, and he didn't feel that way. So after a number of years, he changed career completely and joined the Foreign Office, became a civil servant. We moved down to London together, and that decision and made things a lot more squiggly for us.
Yeah.
So I spent my time at P&G, loved it, as I say, felt really good about it, was very sad to leave, but I went to Coca-Cola thinking it would be exactly the same, brand-led, American multinational. I had a great time, made some great friends there, but it wasn't quite the same culture. Yeah. And then when Rita Clifton came in from Interbrand and talked about this thing called brand consultancy to us at Coca-Cola, I thought, actually, that sounds like a really interesting way to take what I learned I loved, which was exploring how to turn around brands, understanding how to work with people, and a sort of not quite going agency side, but somewhere in between. Went into brand, absolutely loved that. Consultancy suits a butterfly mind, and to move, between different industries and to understand different people was great. But because of the life choice that I'd made, as well as the career choices, we then made a decision to go overseas. So I spent 3 years out in the Middle East, in Dubai. Fascinating. Worked there agency side, so worked for Leo Burnett, had an incredible team of Egyptians, Lebanese, Palestinian, Jordanian, Emirati, a real mix of brilliant people. We were working on marketing right across Saudi as well. So one of my first ads was refused by the authorities because a little kid kissed his mother on the cheek and that wasn't allowed. So, really understanding different cultures. And I found Dubai fascinating, partly because it's the sort of place where things happen really, really fast. And that was intoxicating. So when I moved back to the UK, I was pregnant, and I knew that we'd made a decision that we wanted to go overseas again for one more posting. So I decided, rather than moving into a different role, to set up my own business. Because how hard can that be, right? So I set up an e-commerce business. It was just at the time when brands were really understanding how to work online. It was a fascinating experience to be involved in a startup, to spend my own money versus someone else's. Spent 3 years doing that in the UK, then moved to Estonia, so to Tallinn. Really interesting place, very e-enabled, birthplace of Skype and TransferWise. So a really great place to run an e-commerce business. And nobody noticed I was gone, really, because I had a distributed team who worked wherever. Very, very early days of what we've been all been doing
pioneering,
recently. So we won some awards, actually, because we had a sexy, flexy way of working. Everyone had time sovereignty, so I had a fantastic team. But I did move overseas just as the credit crunch hit, the financial crisis, with a 3-year-old, a 10-week-old and a 3-year-old business. So that was pretty challenging. But we got through it, and then when I came back to the UK, I started doing rounds of investment to grow the business, and I ended up selling the business to Quintessentially, which is a luxury gifts company. This is a long story.
No, I love it.
I worked for them for a year, but then a good friend of mine from Interbrand had set up an organisation called the Caffeine Partnership. So I joined him and spent a number of very happy years. We work with executive teams on their purpose, their pace inside organisations, really helping both startups scaling up to grow up a little bit, understanding what big businesses can do. And I decided at the time to write a book about some of the things I was seeing about people's frustrations about pace. So it was a really fascinating time to do that. And then I had a call from a clever headhunter who said, there's a role going at the Marketing Society. Do you know anything about it? And I'd met my predecessor, Gemma.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about it. And when he talked to me, and when I talked to Craig, our chair, about the purpose, the opportunity to build this community, to help the marketing leaders raise marketing's positive impact, the allure of a 62-year-old organisation that wanted to do more, it felt like a really good time to move. That was slap bang in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
Though. So maybe it wasn't the best time to move into an organisation like
There's a theme running across as well. There's also a bit of a theme about how, I hope I've got this right, it's almost like you get goosebumps from people's different vision and, of course, your own vision, but it's the people that are driving that passion that you sort of then fall in love with perhaps the next opportunity. Would that be right, do you think?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people talk about business being evil, work being a bad thing, but when you see the joy and pleasure that people can get from doing a good job and how businesses can support each other, I just think there are so many stories to tell, there are so many people to help, and getting involved with people I respect and enjoy working with. I found being the experience of being an entrepreneur, which is very, very different to anything else. I know I'm absolutely motivated by teams and building things. So that was quite an interesting learning experience for me.
And I think all that experience as well of living in different countries, I can see why the Marketing Society is so passionate about setting up in different countries and really expanding as well.
I mean, it's fascinating. Anyone who's worked with global organisations or global brands, understanding how to take something, really make it work in different settings, and the thrill of being able to travel again for all of us now, of connecting with people in different ways. It's a great challenge.
Well, I think fair play that during the pandemic you still got some great content out and some great speakers and did a lot. But I must admit it is nice to go back to the fact that we can have the big, the big dinners, the big conferences as well. So
we can have it all. I mean, that's the brilliant thing, and we need to make sure we do. So we're bringing everybody in and supporting everyone when they are, like Wendy, at home today or whatever. That we can connect everybody.
Yeah, hybrid.
Best of both worlds.
So you went to university in Durham, you were saying, and is that where you were from originally?
Nope, I was a soft southerner, and one of the reasons I went to Durham was because I'd never been north of the Watford Gap, which is shocking. Durham's actually not that typical experience, but I loved living in the northeast. No, I'm from Wiltshire originally.
And it sounds like you like to be busy, like to be fast paced and involved. And is that how you always were? I'm always interested in hearing, how people were as kids and how that's influenced where you end up now.
As a kid, I was the youngest of three, and my brother's 6 years older, my sister's 10 years older. So effectively, growing up, I was almost like an only child. And we lived in Savernake Forest, in the middle of nowhere, which was great. But I spent most of my life with my head in books. I've always been a great reader, and so I was probably mainly focused on books. But also, I was very interested in the theatre from a young age. So I, from the age of about 14, I did quite a lot of acting and getting involved in that side of things at school. So head in book or involved in a theatre production, probably.
Fantastic. And was there anyone in particular that you looked up to when you were a child, whether it's someone that you knew or an author or an actor, absolutely anyone?
I think I was lucky enough to have an older brother and sister who were a sort of almost like an extra set of parents in terms of influence. So my brother works in TV, my sister teaches English as a foreign language. They're both very different people, but they were having fun with growing up. They were having fun with being teenagers. They were challenging things. They had strong points of view on what was going on. So I think just seeing them being positive about life, and I was surrounded, my parents weren't always as happy as they maybe could have been with life, and seeing my brother and sister just getting on and doing it was always an influence, I'd say.
Oh, that's really lovely. I don't think we've had that answer before. Siblings. That's really nice to have that experience. I was the oldest, and I don't know if my 18-month younger sister would say that about me. And what was the dream when you were little? What did you want to be?
Well, there's a couple of different versions of this. I found the other day, I was in my parents' attic, and I found a story I'd written as a child.
Oh, wow.
And the story I'd written was a classic. I was an astronaut, and it ends with the classic, all children end with it, and then it was a dream, and I woke up. But the most terrible line at the end, and I don't know, maybe I was 8, I don't know how old I was when I wrote this, was I woke up, it was a dream, something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, girls aren't allowed on the moon. I mean, literally at that early age, and as a fierce feminist and somebody who believes really strongly that we need to get better equality, to see that was horrific. So clearly at some point I was quite interested in being an astronaut. The other thing that someone reminded me of the other day, when I was growing up, I really, really wanted to be Penelope Keith.
Right.
Very specifically Penelope Keith, not just any actress, because it looked such good fun being an actress, and she didn't have to learn accents. She just got to hang out in a manor house, from what I could see. Do you remember Penelope Keith?
Yes,
Play herself.
Yes,
so there you go. That was the dream.
I think I've sort of shared before that I wanted to retire and have cats at the age of 7.
That's a good dream.
And do you know, it could still happen. I mean, it's
Life
let's
goals.
face it. Exactly.
Both those things are possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. And on the theme of people that you look up to, or people who've influenced you or supported you, thinking beyond childhood, who are the people who've really influenced you in your career?
Well, there's always those really important people who help you believe what's possible and encourage you. So I've been so lucky to have mentors and champions and people who have, because they've believed in me, have helped me believe in myself. But I've also been really lucky with the research that I did for Superfast, my book. I got to speak to 100 different leaders across the world, and some of them in particular were continue to be so influential and interesting. But I think the early days at Procter & Gamble, obviously Gary Coombe, who's now global CEO of Gillette, hiring me in the first place, we're still in contact and friends, and he remains an inspiration. And Paul Polman, who was at P&G for a while, but was also one of my interviewees for Superfast, I think is a really good example of what I believe in, which is that you can be incredibly ambitious and be ambitious for a new way of positive business and building that. there is a number of people. So Jose Neves, who was a client I worked with for a while, he's the founder of Farfetch, and he was also one of the Superfast interviewees, and massively fast growth, vertiginous business. I mean, so interesting, but a genuine human, a real inspiration in terms of his revolutionary ideas. And I would say Greg Jackson, who's a friend of mine and also the founder of Octopus Energy, a real example of values-led business. And that you don't have to choose between doing well and doing good. Can I swear? I was going to say, you don't have to be an arsehole to be successful in business. Those that spending time with people like that, those are the people who inspire me and make me want to share their stories and be like them, and understanding that it is not easy. I mean, the time I've spent looking at leadership in the last few years has been really interesting, and reflecting on it in my role as well. It is not easy. You need to be surrounded by people who can help. But I'd say that they're good. The other person I think I'd like to mention is someone who's just passed away, in terms of thinking a lot about people who've influenced me. Really interesting guy who I met a few years ago, who he's been very successful chair of different organisations, but we were introduced and ended up becoming friends, and he became a mentor, and we never had a conversation about that happening. It just happened. Mm-hmm. And at his memorial service a few weeks back, everybody was talking about him being that kind of a person who was so generous with his time. I actually, thinking of the word generous, I'd also bring up Sil Salah, who's the president of the Marketing Society, as another generous person. There are people like that around who just are interested in giving back with nothing. I mean, this guy, John Barton, didn't get anything from me other than hopefully I was good company in the breakfast we had, but helped me so much. So I think there are always people around, and they are people in business who to the outside world will just be seen as money-making, successful, whatever, but the impact they have on their own organisation and on other people is enormous.
I'm sorry to hear that he passed away. Really sorry to hear that, and I'm quite sure that he got plenty out of your relationship as well.
Yeah, it's amazing sort of surrounding yourself by these incredible people that perhaps just a little bit of insight and sort of checking in, it can make such a difference. So yeah, that's a great group of people. Can I go back to your books? So obviously Superfast and LoveWork, which you wrote with Ben Renshaw. That's correct, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Can I just ask about the writing process? I have a sort of an assumption, having sort of known you for a while, that you were probably very disciplined and really just completely sort of focused. But tell me about the process of writing the books.
It was fascinating, and two completely different processes. So writing with a partner, like lots of other things, doing something with a partner is great because you can challenge each other, you can lead each other on. Doing it by yourself, that it does require some discipline, which is interesting. So it was a really interesting experience writing my first book. It was a bit like I said, starting a startup. You sort of think, how hard can it be? I write blogs, I write quickly, I read a lot, but it is. The analogy is very good to talk about. It's like becoming a parent. Feels like a brilliant idea. There's some pleasure in the conception around it all, and then there's an awful lot of pain, but ultimately it is completely worth it. And the writing process for me was interesting because it revealed the classic imposter syndrome or personal block. Halfway through it, I just suddenly realised that I was doubting that I had something to say, that it was going to be good enough. I could feel all these reasons why I wasn't ever going to finish it. And it was interesting to see the ways I got through that. First of all, I recognised that so few women end up writing business books. The stats are appalling, particularly if you look at Audible, the number of audio voices, female voices out there. There are books on diversity, but the number of books where women are talking about leadership is appallingly low. So I was really spurred on by the idea that if nothing else, if no one ever read the book, at least that was something that changed the ratio a little bit. And then the two things that got me through it, one was I suddenly realised I could write a book that I wanted to read. I mean, classic thing. So as I was writing it, I was having a bit of fun with the wordplay. I was being frivolous, and there was a little bit voice in my head going, "Is this serious enough?" And I was like, actually, I'm going to write down all the things I found interesting and I think will be helpful for other people. So getting through it, this is a book that could help. And one of the most amazing things about having written a book is when you get a message from somebody who you've never met. It's not your dad, it's not a good friend, and they tell you that what you've written has helped. So it's just incredible. The other thing that got me through was, again, one of the principles of the book actually is progress drives pace. So I had a really ridiculous, geeky Excel spreadsheet where I worked out the number of words I needed to write, and every time I sat down and wrote, I just, gave me a sense of how close I was getting to the title, even if all those words were terrible, getting the words down. And that, I think, there are so many other times in business where you see that with teams, that feeling of, what's going to show us that we're making progress was really helpful. Second time round, absolutely brilliant, because Ben Renshaw, this amazing leadership coach, he's an inordinate amount of energy. He came to me and said, let's write this book together. I went, yeah, that's great. And then I started a new job. I went, I'm not sure I can do this, Ben. But the energy he had, but also what was really interesting was the creative abrasion you get when two brains look at something. Yeah. So it was really fun polishing it. And a lot of it is, what he's learned by being a coach and bringing it to life and putting it together in a way that was accessible. It was a much more pleasurable process in some ways. Probably less deep learning for me than the first book, but also really just the things you learn second time round, everything is quicker because you have learned how to do it and understanding what's important to you and your style. It's a fascinating process. I need to get moving on book number 3 now.
Good luck with that. So that will be great to sort of hear what your next book is when you're ready to talk about that. And just thinking about back to sort of the Marketing Society, you get to speak to so many CMOs and great marketing leaders. What's exciting you about our industry at the moment?
There's a lot that is actually incredibly exciting. I've just come from a conversation with a senior marketer, and we've had lots recently where people are talking about the changing role of marketing inside organisations, the greater value people are seeing around that role, particularly at a senior level on the board, what the marketers can do to connect up what the future looks like with that understanding of connecting the organisation to real human insight. So what's exciting me is a greater appreciation in business of the critical role of marketing when it comes to growth, when it comes to shaping and developing the business. I think what's exciting, everybody in business generally, and particularly in marketing, is a sense of what's possible. Yeah. It's slightly also the downside of it all, and it's exhausting at the moment. The potential that's out there for anybody, the pressure of all that you can do and needing to know makes it quite intense, which is why working with great partners, building up a good team of support around you is critical for the marketers that I'm speaking to. The other thing I think that's really exciting is the marketers are the ones that are joining up the different parts of the organisation together. So actually a lot of them are building brands from inside out inside the organisation as well. And just understanding that marketing can be a tool which is both responsive, so it can help organisations, as we've seen through COVID, it can really help turn, pivot, move in the right direction. And it can also be a role, that's where the leadership piece comes in, that helps an organisation be responsible to ground everything back inside the organisation to be customer centric, which is what makes great organisations. So I feel really excited about where we're going. I also personally feel really excited because I'm spending time with some incredible marketing leaders, and I'm so proud and impressed by what they're doing inside their organisations. So lots to feel good about.
And are you seeing a lot of sort of change for the better as well? Because I feel like there's still, as an industry, I feel like we've still got a way to go. Are you sort of seeing that change starting to happen?
In what sense?
Well, I suppose I'm sort of focusing on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, just making better strides to be more diverse, to be more inclusive. I know that it's top of the priority for the Marketing Society. I wondered if you're sort of starting to see change happening in different brands.
Absolutely. And I think it's great. I mean, again, things to be optimistic about, really complex. And there's a nervousness around everybody. I think the conversation is starting to change where people know what should be done and that something needs to be done. And I think what's exciting is people are sharing and talking about examples. I mean, for us as a community, that's where I'm seeing it work. Here's an example of how we've become more representative with our marketing. Here's an example of what we're doing inside our organisation to build on the cognitive diversity that you need in creative industries, in any kind of innovation. So I think the narrative is definitely, it's moved forward hugely. I think the challenge for people is there's still a nervousness, there's still a need to understand what's right, what's not, how do we narrate that. So a lot of the time I'm seeing and listening to conversations amongst our members where they're needing to come together as a community and talk about, well, I'm finding this hard and this is a decision I need to make and I'm struggling with this. How have you done that? So I think that the intention is there. People understand what needs to be done. And actually, when we come together and talk about it, when we share the ideas, when we talk through how difficult it is to get it right, because these are changing times and they have to be changing times, we can do a lot more then.
Great. And what are you personally proud of? So this could be your career, it could be outside of your career, just something that you're kind of like just really gives you a sense of pride.
I love the idea of pride per se, and we were talking about it earlier, weren't we? It's a sin to be prideful, but it's also really important to celebrate success and celebrate things you feel good about. So what do I feel proud of? I think as a parent, people always say, I must talk about my children. I don't feel that it's my right to be proud of my children because I think I really like them. I've got two and I feel lucky I like them. Yeah. But in some ways, to say I feel proud of them feels like I have more to do with how they've turned out, so I feel a bit uncomfortable with that. What do I feel proud of? I feel incredibly proud of what we're building at the Marketing Society. These last 2 years, we've got an amazing team. I really, really like our team, the way in which we're working together as a super team to bring our individual strengths, to enjoy what we're doing. We've been really working on how we enjoy what we're doing and how we support our community of change makers, these incredible people who are trying to do their best in difficult circumstances to lead marketing inside their businesses, to lead the industry and the profession, to help change it for the better. So I feel really proud of our team. I feel really proud to be part of the Marketing Society. It's a 62-year-old organisation. We're global, but we are making a difference in supporting people who are themselves making a difference. So I feel really proud and happy to have made the decision to become part of it. Impatient for us to do more.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. And perhaps if I can continue being a little bit deeper, I've always been inspired by your drive. You're so passionate and you just seem to be doing so many things. Makes me feel a little exhausted sometimes, but it's really impressive. But do you have like a personal mission for life? I told you it was a bit deep.
Yeah. My mission with work, so my mission with life is, I can't remember exact Maya Angelou words, but to thrive and survive and do it and with some passion and some style. But the work focus and my purpose, I feel really strongly that business can and should be a force for good. And in order to make that happen, leaders need to be energised, inspired and supported. And a personal mission which has always been there with writing, with consultancy, with mentoring, with coaching, and absolutely with what we're doing as a community is to help accelerate that leadership and to help make sure that business can be positive and then that it can do more. So finding ways to support that's my filter, that's my foundation from a work point of view.
I love it. Well, I'll let Wendy get a little bit less deep now.
Yeah, if that's okay. Some may say frivolous is what this section's going to be, but no, we just get a bit more personal now and maybe a little bit less deep. So I'd love to know, what's your idea of a perfect weekend and if you have any guilty pleasures?
So perfect weekend. So one of the themes of Superfast, and we talk about being busy and how to make it happen, is all around the idea of variable pace setting. So the power of the pause, and weekends are a perfect example of that. So I really try hard with weekends to make them a time to reflect, to connect, to recharge. Obviously, I want to spend time with my family at the weekend. It's really important. So hanging out with my ridiculously opinionated and fun teenagers and my husband together is a perfect weekend. I do use it as a moment in the week when I reflect. So we have a team ritual on a Friday where we share our weekly wins, and they can be personal, they can be work, and we do that on a Friday. I also have a group of friends, and we check in on a Friday. They're work friends. We check in on the highlights of the week together, which is a really interesting reflection moment. And I plan my next 2 weeks ahead. I try and focus on what I'm looking forward to and what needs to be done. But at a weekend, it's the rest of my family are rubbish morning people. I'm the only one that's an annoying morning person. So a Saturday morning is often a time to write, a time to catch up with some things. I never send emails on a weekend. I may write them.
Schedule send,
because I think that is really important. We, within our team, we have very intense weeks. I'm often out in the evenings. To be able to use that as a precious pause is critical. So, guilty pleasures, though. I mean, least cool thing is that I'm an Archers omnibus addict. I'm a general Radio 4 fan, but my Archers is probably the thing that's a guilty pleasure. And making the most. I love living in London, so making the most of catching up with people, walking by the river. Seeing people eating, drinking, enjoying the weekend. So, yeah.
That sounds
big weekend fan.
Wonderful. Yeah, it sounds a really great mixture of productive and restful. Love it. And on the theme of food then, if we were to have a peek inside your fridge, what would we find?
Well, a friend of mine has set up a really interesting business called Women Wise, where they are doing some very interesting things around nutrition for certain age women. So she gave
Don't know what you're talking about.
She gave me brilliant access to this amazing nutritionist and an expert who did all sort of bloods and things on me. So my fridge is full of protein and vegetables. So a big fan of that, and gin. Massive amount of gin. It's a fantastic thing to have in there. So that's what you'll see in my fridge.
Wonderful.
Gin and protein, I think.
Yeah, why not?
That. Actually, I'm realising just how obsessed about food we are, because my next question is actually more about restaurants. So I'm a big believer in mixing business with food, and I love restaurants. But do you have a bit of a go-to favourite in London, or maybe further afield in Dubai or New York or something?
I love food, and I think restaurants are great, so I'm a big fan. So what would I guess if this is not a way to reveal what I'm like, but actually to give tips to people, the one thing I would recommend to everyone is breakfast at the Ritz.
Oh, nice.
But not the Ritz that you're thinking of. The Ritz in Hammersmith is the best greasy spoon in the whole world. It's absolutely brilliant, classic. It's a really good place to take people from overseas because it's a real English breakfast, fry up. Really strongly recommended on King Street in Hammersmith. But if I was to go a bit posher and my favourite restaurant to go to if we were celebrating and doing something special would be the River Cafe.
Oh, nice.
So I love the Thames. I'm a West Londoner, being there, and the food is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Good cocktails too.
Calming. Now, thinking about lockdown, things are easing quite a lot, which is amazing. But were there any habits that you started developing during lockdown that you're actually quite happy to have kept?
I think it was something I did anyhow, but did more of and encouraged the team to do. So the walk and talk. The hardest thing about lockdown was over Zoom and the way it made you feel. And I think that there's a lot of interesting research on the power of walking, and there's a whole thing Socrates used to talk about. It is solved by walking, solvitur ambulando. When you go for a walk with somebody, you can really unlock things, and when you talk things through in your brain, it really helps you solve problems. So in my previous role, the founder of the Caffeine Partnership, Andy Milligan, who's a genuine human, and I used to do our weekly planning meetings walking up and down the Thames. So keeping that in lockdown as a way of saying every time I could, if there was somebody I didn't need to Zoom with, but that we needed to work something through, to do a walk and talk. So that's a habit I've kept. And I'm really trying to make sure we all encourage each other to phone up more rather than Zooming, because it's somehow very different. And to be outside and make the most of it, again, the river, is amazing what a difference. So I guess walking and talking more.
And I think those, so obviously there's the walking while talking to someone in your headphones or whatever while you're on your phone, but when you can actually walking next to someone, I think can be incredibly intimate, can't it? There's I don't know, there's probably something to do with the body language that you're not actually looking at each other, you're sort of walking together. you can just be a bit more vulnerable and share more.
It's brilliant with teenagers.
Right, okay.
Because eye contact is complicated. Or if you need to talk about something quite difficult with people, rather than having to do the eye contact, which can be hard, the companionship of walking together. Absolutely, good thought, yeah.
And we don't have to walk 6 foot apart anymore.
I know.
Which helps as well. Doesn't that all seem incredibly bizarre now?
Oh, it's so nice to be hugging again.
Yes, it really is. Right, so if Tamara and I had it in our power to give you an extra hour every day, how would you spend that?
Calling people. So absolutely calling my friends who I don't speak to often enough, calling my team, because every time we have a chat about something, we can unlock things together, we can connect. It's really, really nice. I definitely spend it on the phone. When I have to do a car journey and I can do it hands-free and have a call with somebody on it, I always take that opportunity to do that, because there's definitely not enough time to connect with people.
No. Oh, that's a good one.
And I have more than an hour, though, surely.
You can have a couple, it's fine.
Let's ask God for an extension. Let's have 36 hours in a day. That's what I might just about get through things then.
Yeah, let's 36 and be done with it. That sounds great. Okay. How would your friends describe you?
Well, to go back to the early point, they would probably describe me as too busy, because we don't get to see each other often enough through the way things work with work. I hope they would describe me as positive, so I'd always rather be a radiator than a drain to be around.
So my last question before the end, karaoke. Are you a fan? Do you have a go-to song?
So my dad, who I'm still very close to, he's 82. I mean, in terms of life goals, he's just a great character. And he worked for a Japanese company in years gone by. So he used to bring a karaoke machine to our school fetes. Brilliant. So we were, and then he'd have it there at the weekend and sing away. And so for his 80th birthday, we as family bought him a karaoke machine to have. So this new year, in fact, he was there with 3 13-year-olds, my youngest and 2 others, singing karaoke till 3 a.m. So that's really good. So yeah, karaoke, big fan. Terrible singer. I mean, I really cannot sing. It's a real frustration because I love music, but I cannot sing. So what would be my song? I guess my song would therefore be one that would actually, when I was singing it, everyone else had to join in with. So what would that be? Sweet Caroline, something like that.
Sure.
Bit of Frank, sing-alonger.
Lizzie Renahan, who is runs my choir, I think I've told you before that I'm like in a pop choir.
I love that.
And she's
so
just
good.
the most amazing person, but her philosophy is very much that everybody can sing, it's just that perhaps they weren't given the right encouragement. So in the same way that you didn't think that you could go to the moon, perhaps someone wasn't saying to you, yes, you can sing, and therefore you don't use your muscles. So my advice
growth
is to
mindset.
you have to do the growth mindset on the singing, and you just have to go for it. And to be honest, karaoke, it doesn't actually matter if you can sing or not. It's all about the performance, right? Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I want just one last opportunity for you. Is there anything that we haven't covered, or I can leave you to have the final thoughts?
Anything we haven't covered? I mean, I'm sure we could talk for hours about some of the questions you've already raised. I guess the thought would just be to talk more about the Marketing Society. We are enormously ambitious in terms of bringing together people who want to make an impact and want to make a difference in marketing. We want more people to join. We want more people to support what we're doing. We want to connect up more interesting people together. So I guess the thought would be come and get in contact, join us, be part of what we're trying to do.
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.